Okay, you're live.
Thank you. And I will call to order the February 17th Quality of Life Committee. And if we could get a roll call vote. Or roll call to see who's here. Attendance, there we go.
Councillor Cassett-Sanchez.
Here.
Councillor Garcia.
Present.
Councillor Rivera.
Here.
Councillor Romero-Worth.
I am also here. So, and then Councillor Villarreal will be joining us. Her last meeting is running late, the CDC meeting. She'll join us when she can. And so she'll be excused up until the moment she arrives. Approval of the consent agenda. Is there anything the committee would like to discuss? We have a short consent agenda tonight.
Councillor, approval of agenda first.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
So do we have a motion or do we have changes to the agenda?
No changes from me today.
Okay, changes from the committee? And if not, a
Move to
motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion from Councillor Cassett-Sanchez, a second from Councillor Rivera. And if we can call the roll on the approval of the agenda.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett-Sanchez.
Yes.
And Chair Romero-Worth.
Yes,
And I see
I'm sorry.
Councillor Villarreal has joined, so let me add her to the panelist.
Great. Okay, we will then move to approval of the consent agenda. Are there items the committee would like to pull for discussion? If not, is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Rivera.
I just have a couple of quick questions on item B.
Okay. Anything else? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
We have a motion from Councillor Rivera, a second from Councillor Cassett-Sanchez to approve the consent agenda as amended. Can we take a vote on that again?
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett-Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
And Chair Carol Romero-Worth.
Yes. All right, then we go to approval of the minutes. Are there changes to these minutes from February 3rd Quality of Life Committee meeting? And if there are no changes, is there a motion to approve them?
Approve.
Second.
A motion to approve the minutes from February 3rd from Councillor Cassett-Sanchez, a second from Councillor Rivera, and we need to take a vote on this as well.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett-Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Chair Carol Romero-Worth.
Yes. And with that, we will go to the item pulled from the consent agenda, a request, excuse me, for approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the amount of $250,000 in FY21 to wildland fire operations, including 15 temporary seasonal wildland employees. And Councillor Rivera, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Moya, thank you for being here today. On the copy of the salary sheet, I think it has $52,026. That's for all 15 firefighters?
Chair Councillor Rivera, no, that is for the 52,000 is for the Sawyers. So I have 11 firefighter tech positions, and then I have 4 Sawyer positions. So the 52,000 would cover the Sawyers, and then the rest of the money would cover the 11 forestry techs. So a total of 15. So it's broken down into 2 different pay scales.
Right, so the title of it is Wildland Forestry Technician. It doesn't specify that part of that is for sawyers. Now, I've never seen this form before. It vaguely looks familiar. I don't remember seeing it, but again, the title end is for Wildland Forestry Techs, and I don't see anything on sawyers unless you can direct me to the page.
I can send that to you. So I think I just put it all as one, but we actually have, it's 2 different pay scales. So 11 sawyers and 4 forestry. I'm sorry, 11 forestry techs and 4 sawyer positions, and I'll send you that very shortly.
You can send it to me, and then I would include it in future packets as this moves forward. And then, I know we get funding back for sending these crews out. Is it enough to cover basically the $250,000 that we're spending here?
Correct. Last year we brought in $500,000 total. So that goes back to the city budget. That doesn't come back to the fire at all. So what I was trying to do to change it a little bit is you guys upfront the cost to me, and then all the money that I get back on reimbursements goes back to the city. So I don't see any of that. So it's kind of like, borrowing a little bit and then I pay you back at the end.
Right. So have there ever been times where we don't get the funding back that we put into it? So I'm thinking this year's a very dry year in New Mexico, in spite of this weekend's or this week's moisture. We've had pretty dry, and I think it's still, the forecast is still for dry conditions. Is that team going to be focused here in New Mexico? I know that's hard to try to determine, but.
So that was our ultimate goal. I don't want them to get too far. We had a few deployments in Arizona, but when the conditions got worse here, I held them back, and I said, we're going to only do deployments in New Mexico. So if we have to protect the city, I can bring them back closer. So it just depends on the time of the year, but I would like to keep them close unless we know we're okay here, then I would send them out of state. And I think we went on 6 out-of-state deployments last year in the summertime, around July and August. We mostly went to Arizona.
Right. And I know that's how we get reimbursed for the team itself. The makeup of the team, is it typically the same people coming back year after year?
In the past, yes, we have had them. We have 4 core people. I don't know if everybody knows, but we have 4 core that work 24 hours or the whole year. So we have 4 people that work full time. And then we have 1 wildland specialist, and that's Porfirio Chavarria. And he runs our mitigation program for the city. And we currently don't have a wildland superintendent, and I'm currently have applications, and I'm interviewing them next week for that. So we will have a supervisor to manage this whole division starting next week.
All right. So really the continuity of the team, I think, is important, so that, for the safety of, it's an extremely dangerous job. So that's why I was asking about that. One last question. I know we use fire station number 9 to house this team, and they're also doing testing for COVID. So are they gonna put testing for COVID somewhere else, or move the team somewhere else?
So right now we're hoping that the COVID stops. If not, we have station 6. That's where we had them housed before. I'm trying to get it back up secure. I don't know if you know, they broke into station 6. So I'm trying to get that secure before I put anybody back at station 6. So right now they are working out of station 9. And then I have all the equipment at our training center at station 5. So I'm hoping by the time we get these back, if they do let us go back to station 9, that's where we'll go. If not, our secondary site will be station 6 off Alameda.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
I'll move for approval, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Rivera, second by Councilor Garcia, to approve the request for approval of budget adjustment resolution in the amount of $250,000 in FY21 to wildland fire operations. If we could take a roll call on that.
Could you repeat who moved and seconded that? I'm sorry.
Counselor Rivera moved and Counselor Garcia made the second.
Thank you. Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
and Chair Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, with that, we go to item 7, which are action items for discussion. We do not have any of those tonight. So we'll move on to the 2 presentations we have. And the first one is the, hold on, my Midtown Civic Engagement Team and Community Engagement Mini Grant Program. And I believe Rich Brown is here to help us with that presentation. Welcome.
Can you do me a favor? Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I will not be moderating this presentation tonight. I will have Daniel Hernandez, who's our project manager from Midtown. And I think we're waiting for Michael. I don't know if Michael's arrived yet, but Daniel Hernandez will sort of take us through, and Alex Ladd, who have been working on the public engagement portion. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, and then they'll take it from there and then answer questions if they have any.
Okay, great. Welcome, Daniel, and welcome, Alexandra Ladd.
Yes, well, I know it's been a long time coming and people roll their eyes when we begin talking about this, but it has been just as difficult for us as it has been for you. So thank you for your patience. I know that it has been patience that we've stressed. So we're here. We signed the contract back in August. Alexandra and I worked closely together on all of the scoping really that happened over the course of the summer before we executed the contract at the end of summer. And since then, the DPAC team has been sort of organizing more than anything, and they've done a variety of things, and Alex will go through the work plan schedule and sort of the early organizing activities. But anyway, I just wanted to make that introduction and to thank everybody for their patience. Michael Pride, the director of the DPAC program, will be on with us. I was just texting with her, she should be on any minute. But we'll start with the presentation of the overall work plan that just got submitted to us at the end of last week and was for fine editing at the beginning of this week. So it's done, and we'll circulate that to you along with the presentation that Alexandra is going to present. So Alex, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Daniel. I did just get a text from Michael saying that she's followed the links, but nobody can see her. So I'm not sure. I don't see Joe on anymore. I'm not sure if she's.
Let's see. She's in the waiting room.
I just added.
There she is. Okay. Thank you,
Sorry
Jennifer.
about that.
No worries. Yeah, it's like a special kind of hell to be stuck in the never land of Zoom. All right. Well, thank you, Daniel, and thanks to the committee for let's see, hold on just a sec. I'll share my screen and we've got a couple of slides here. Thanks for setting the stage, Daniel. And just to make sure everybody can see that, thumbs up, it's good to go, right? All right, great.
Yep, you're good.
Thank you. So what I wanted to start off by saying was that we are going to provide a copy of the full plan for the committee to review, but we wanted to kind of talk about it conceptually first because it's a lot of words and it's a lot of sort of complicated, somewhat squishy, somewhat, there's lots of academia in here, and we wanted to make sure that we were just really setting the stage for this approach. I'm really excited about this. I don't think we do public engagement this way ever from a government perspective. I think we have a huge opportunity to create a system that's going to work better for us in lots of upcoming projects. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to also work with the DPAC team from UNM's Community and Regional Planning Program. Professor Pride and her team of students are amazing, and working in conjunction with the Santa Fe Art Institute. I think this is really going to be exciting. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of points about the approach. This isn't just kind of the way we, from a government perspective, normally do public engagement, where we tell everybody what we want to do and they get mad and scream at us, and then we do it anyway, or we maybe adjust a few things, but there's not a whole lot of kind of iteration that's really that the system can even allow for. So this approach, working with this team, is really focused on what are promising practices of public engagement and how do we apply them here. There's an emphasis on using values to drive the approach: transparency, co-creation, collaboration, inclusivity, and accountability. And again, to this point, that this is something that we want to be replicable. We want to be able to use this approach to public engagement for many, many projects into the future. Again, we are looking at, we're working with an academic group, we're working with an arts group. So there's a big focus on creating a community of learning. So bringing people together so that everyone is contributing and learning from each other. The approach is based on a concept that we're calling the Midtown Engagement Partners. And these partners are identified through an application process that DPAC and the Art Institute will be managing. And what these partners will be applying for is a stipend that's sponsored by the city. And this will help pay for their engagement activity. So in the application, they will propose an activity and using a variety of creative approaches. So this goes way beyond our usual, the charrette, the ENN meeting, the Survey Monkey survey. Like, this is really asking for unique ways for stakeholder groups to engage with the project and with the place. And importantly, a public engagement calendar of activities. So the activities that are both sponsored and designed through this process will be available for the public to participate in. So there's a clear 5-step process. So it is time bound. We won't be doing this forever. We have a calendar. I think the process started, as Daniel was saying, it feels like a lot longer than August 2020. But officially in August 2020, you will notice that some of these dates overlap because this is not a truly linear process. It's more of an iterative process. But the first phase was really for the engagement team, for the DPAC folks to start gathering information and talking to different stakeholder groups. There was a charrette with city staff to just kind of understand from the various areas of expertise the conditions related to the site. And a part of this was also looking at the previous work, the previous planning guidelines, how the previous process worked, both to serve certain goals for the redevelopment of the site, but also how it could be improved upon. And as an outcome for this first phase is the work plan and schedule. So that is the point where we have arrived, and we will be sharing that work with you as well. The next process, which again has already started, but the next phase is to really co-create and organize this group of partners. The first round of stipends will be awarded. City staff is also creating sort of a wish list of what we think goes into a sustainable development. So that will be part of this process. And then this calendar with all of these various activities will be developed and provided. And again, the outcome is this program of these events. Now, I think it's important. We don't know what these groups are going to propose to do, and it could run the gamut from sort of more traditional planning and land use sort of conversations to creating art, creating poetry, different kinds of engagement with the site. And so it'll be quite fascinating to see what comes out of it. But I think the important piece is that it opens a door for a lot of sort of unconventional ways to talk about this place and to figure out what goals are for its future development. The next phase, beginning in about March and going through the summer, is really implementing all of these steps of the process. We would expect that the second round of stipends, so the second round of events, will go out, culminating in a Voices of Santa Fe forum. But really, it's just like the full activation of the site will be happening during this time. And I think I want to just quickly add that typically, particularly when the government's leading an engagement process, we're kind of looking at an extraction. It's an extractive process. We want the community to tell us what's important to them. We want them to share their lived experience. And we're going to use that information to our own end, right? And so the idea behind the stipends was to actually reward the community for providing their input and their insight and their expertise and their stories and their knowledge. And to make it possible, because many of these groups wouldn't be able to support an activity if they didn't have some financial support. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. And then the outcome from this next phase will be to have this full collaboration between all of these partners to really affirm what the development vision and goals for the site are, and to start to really look at what are the priorities moving forward for the next owner and occupant of this site. The next phase from the summer through the late fall would be what are the actual recommendations that come out of this? What are what's the promising practice that we can engage moving forward? How can we change the way the city approaches this work to make it more accessible and more inclusive of our community? And that'll be the deliverable for that next phase, will be this recommendation for how the city can both attach this public engagement to this site, but also take the process and move it forward so that we do this better all the way around. And then finally, I think this is almost as important as the actual recommendations, is how do you reflect on what has been done, and how do you use that to evaluate the next step of the work? So there will be a lot of emphasis on just kind of creating that replicable practice at this point in time. And the outcome will be a document and a set of recommendations. So the city is ultimately the client of this process. And so at the end of the day, the city will receive a deliverable for moving forward with this work. And that is the end of the slideshow. And I believe that
Did Professor
Pride
want to add anything to what's been talked about here? Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. No, I'm really excited. I think Alex did a great job. It's been a long slog, as you might imagine, and as you've observed, adjusting everything we might do or might have done to this continuing pandemic context. But we continue to really hold the same values throughout, and that is really valuing, centering community voices and multiple sources of expertise. The stipend program was an idea that existed before DPAC got involved, but I especially appreciate it because, in a way, through the stipends, we multiply all of our efforts. We really value and support the work that organizations are already doing with constituents that they're already working with and that they know really well. They're trusted. We imagine that's who will get the stipends, are trusted community leaders or community facilitators. And I'm really excited to see how those things go. We don't predict it. That's one of the fuzzy things about this kind of really community-centered process, is that we count on co-designing it with these partners as they come on board, as we build relationships, and the outcomes will be co-created with them. And I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you. And Mayor, I noticed you're joining us with your video on. Was there something you wanted to add to this process, about this process, before we go to the committee members?
No, I just didn't want anybody to think I was lurking in the shadows, and so I'm coming full forward to just listen in, and very much appreciate Professor Pride's contribution, and I'm a huge fan, so I wanted to be fully present for what she had to say.
Terrific. All right, thank you. So we'll go to the committee. I believe Councilor Villarreal, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, Mayor, you're lurking from my meeting in the CDC to this one. Just wanted to thank Michael. It's good to see you again, even though it's virtually on the screen. It's been a while.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a couple questions about the process. So the stipend piece, I think that's important. And I'm just curious, what's the amount you all are thinking that would be provided for community groups?
Great question, and I appreciate it. The city is actually holding, I think it's going to be $45,000, $50,000 total to support this program, 45,000 of which will go as stipends directly to the grantees, if you will, the partners. Called the Midtown Activation Partners, and that another 5,000 to provide some support infrastructure. We will be rolling this out in 2 phases. So the first phase, we are looking at $5,000 per grantee, and probably about 4 or 5 of these. And those will probably, we'll have slightly different criteria. We'll use our current criteria that's developed in conversation with our current team and advisors. And then when those partners join in, we will work with them to review and revise the program as it stands, revise the call, and reach out to a second phase of grantees. In our highest hopes and visions, these first grantees also kind of act as mentors for the second phase of grantees, working with them and with each other, that we'll all learn from each other, share experiences. But this first round will have a little extra role because they'll be vetting the applications, redesigning the program and vetting the applications for the second round.
Got it. Thank you. And what did the
and
amount
deciding
range?
On the amounts.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the range of amounts would depend on the activity, because some may be just very simple, and then others may be more involved with more community partnerships. So is that what how you'll
we're looking at averaging at about 5, so that we'd get at least 9 grantees, and that you're right, some may just need a little bit of help with just a single event or promotional materials or recording and documentation. We're going to try to do some of the documentation. We're going to help them do the reporting that the city requires. We're using the sponsorship mechanism from the city, a great idea from Alex, and was kind of simplify things. And so we imagine it could be as low as 2 and maybe as much as 7, but we'd like to make sure that it spreads around to multiple partners rather than consolidating it all in 2 or 3 activities and organizations.
Thank you. And so if there's a group that needs technical assistance or some kind of support, would you be supporting them, Michael, or is the city going to support? Okay.
Yeah, that's part of why we're holding $5,000 to provide that support. We imagine that the first round of grantees will be more established or seasoned organizations, fully able to go ahead and what is it that they have to go onto the Munis site and register as a vendor and those kinds of things. We will provide infrastructure support, also trying to ensure that these activities are linked, for community. They understand that this is part of a series, although we don't claim to take ownership for any of the organization's activities. We'll also be, I don't know if we didn't talk about the Voices at Midtown series. That would be kind of a public education and engagement series, inviting a lot of local expertise, and maybe also determined with some help by the partners to determine some featured presenters that then would catalyze a conversation around the various themes of the development.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarity. So I guess I'm always wondering, when we start collecting, or I think Alex used the word extracting information or data or input from these various partners, how does the information or those recommendations then actually inform the development of Midtown? Like, that pathway has never been clear to me. Like, we get this information. We got some information in that first round a few years ago. And there was some guidelines that we were able to use from that process. But I'm just curious, like, how it then translates into informing not just the city, but the potential development team, and where did those recommendations go, and how do they actually reach the right partners, whoever they will be in the future?
Great question, Renee. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel and Alex to respond, or Rich. Because we feel very strongly that these things should the recommendations should show up, really affect the outcomes in terms of these these policies and contracts. But Daniel?
Yeah, I'll take a stab and Alex chime in. So in the work plan, you'll see, I can't remember what phase it is, and we created these slides to kind of condense the work plan into an easy presentation. But in the work plan, you'll see that there's this phase where the DPAC team will be looking at ways that other communities have documented these processes so that it affects public policy. And we're calling it, community benefits and public policy. But basically, we anticipate that there, and I think it was in the presentation, that there's a community development report that comes out so that it's documented all of the priorities that people have expressed through the process around access to jobs, affordable housing, types of education and access to education, just all the things that they've identified at public space and programming for arts and culture, et cetera. But anyway, to document that, put it in a report, and that report would be, we anticipate that report will be part of any disposition agreements, so that a developer or a series of developers, and particularly the city, is held accountable for implementing those public policy objectives. And many of them will be longer term. Some of them may be immediate, like percentages of affordable housing within the development, and targeting what populations, or whatever we want to bulletin board advertising jobs. I'm making it all up. But all the kinds of things that people say that will help them feel part of the growth of Midtown development over time.
And I'll just add to that, I think the other really important piece too is understanding what the needs of the surrounding neighborhoods are. We know there's a lot of displacement pressure that people feel unstable in a lot of those neighborhoods. And so how do we, as a city, leverage our resources to make sure that that we're supporting those surrounding neighborhoods as well?
Yeah.
And I'll add that part of our responsibility and our privilege is to translate some of community concerns and interests into policy recommendations, and identifying best practices, or promising practices to meet those goals, so that you kind of have a catalog of promising practices that correlate specifically with these recommendations, rather than just we want more or less of this or that.
Thank you. I guess when I keep thinking about like how this is going to move forward, and we've taken a couple steps back and trying to move forward again. And if this really is going to be dependent on the analysis of staff as well, like what is going to happen. And our last presentation that was given to us from the other I'm forgetting their names, that presented to us at the last council meeting. They had indicated to us about the potential, or one of the avenues that we would actually end up selling the property. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when I hear that, then I just feel like our community engagement process is like, then gets put back again, because there would be this urgency to sell parcels, and that we wouldn't, I guess we have this time frame and we're crunched for time. And so I'm worried about that, like to make sure that community engagement is going to happen. And I trust the team that's going to be doing this. It's just that how does it coincide with Rich's, work as you all are parallel trying to move forward with like decisions and options that we are going to have to select as a council? So maybe Rich could answer that, like how that goes together, because we have this time frame, we're in a time crunch, yet we want to do this right. And then there's this possibility of potential sale of the property. And so I'm just seeing how do you see this working together?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, thank you for the question. And I'm going to have Daniel maybe add some more to it. But I think that to your point, I think having this discussion tonight informs the type of policy decision the council probably will need to make. If you find that community engagement is super important, and if you look at some of the options as we move into, do we just make it a building of weeds and sell it? Or do we take a couple months and really assess what we need to do to get it better? Or do we take another 9 months to say, guess what? We need more community input. We need more transparency. We need more progress reports. And we see that our decision will be relied upon this progress that's starting now. So I think to your point, this conversation and this project kind of helps you sort of figure out the paths that are good and right. And I'm not trying to persuade you. I'm just saying that this discussion and then this process tells you what sort of path makes the right sense for the city, for the community, and for what we're trying to do with Midtown. And Daniel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I think that's kind of to your answer to that point.
I'll add something, Rich, really quickly. I think, too, if the policy direction is to add value to the property to increase its marketability, any point at which we're adding value, we can also leverage something from the beneficiary of that value. And I think that's really important that, this process is giving us the core values, or the kind of that idea of what are the community development priorities for our community, and we can leverage that into a future transaction.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
That's well said, Alexandra. Yeah, I think that was really the crux of Dina's presentation, was every piece of investment increases the opportunity for us to get increased community benefits as well. Excuse me. Sorry.
I do see the connection. I think that I value, you already know how I feel about community engagement. You okay, Daniel? So I don't want us to miss this piece, because there's other maybe counselors, other opinions that we need to get this done quickly and expedite it. And I don't share that. I know we all as taxpayers are paying for this property, and there are some issues. I just think we have there's a lot more value hearing from ideas from the community, not just the ones prior to this process, but also new ideas and new, inputs that I think would be important. So I just want to make sure that doesn't get missed. I don't think it'll get missed, but I'm just seeing it together is hard for me right now. It's challenging. And then the only thing I would just recommend is I don't think works very well is using words like charrettes, making sure we don't use words that are only certain people know what they are. I always don't well, I think you all know, I don't feel great about surveys. They get a small percentage of our population participating. And although I'm not saying that's not valuable, I just want to be cautious about just surveys. I don't think they're useful in the grand scheme of things. So just want to flag that. And I'm excited that Michael's part of this. That gives me a lot of hope, as well as SFAI and other community partners that I think have been along the way wanting to participate in some manner. So I'm sure that they'll be informed about this process and the potential to set up activities and engagement opportunities for our community. So thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, I think you had your hand up next.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this process unfolds. I think, as Alexandra said at the beginning, it's exciting to see us taking on a different model. I had a couple questions about how we are choosing the community engagement partners. Professor Pride, you had a much better name for them that I'm already forgetting. But how does that selection process unfold, and what does that look like in terms of making sure that we are getting the right mix of groups to make sure that we are elevating voices that we may not otherwise hear?
Another great question. Thank you. We have a loose set of criteria. I should pull up my document here for selecting the first round. One is kind of this seasoned, established, the capacity of the organization, and another would be the kind of engagement process or activity they are proposing. Will it reach, how many people will reach, what pockets of the Santa Fe community are centered in their work, their ability to kind of provide data, whether qualitative and quantitative data, and the fit. I guess we'll find ourselves saying, can they really do that for $5,000 or something like that? So if it seems like a $10,000 project, we're asking if they have other funding. So we don't want to eliminate anything just because it's big or, really ambitious, but I don't know, we haven't talked about it, but at some point we may actually try to get some foundation or other funding to supplement and be able to do more. Our first round will be our core team and a couple of advisors. And then we wanted to invite some key people in the community that have been working on, doing this kind of work over time. Wanted to invite a couple of them to participate with us as application reviewers and help us select. So we'll have a rubric, we'll score, each application against the rubric, and then talk about the proposals that rise to the top, and then make decisions. That was probably more important, the rubric, a reliable set of criteria that are scored and that are fair and really, center the values that we've just talked about.
I wanted to continue just a little bit. Michael, would you tell the committee also, the criteria, the program itself was also, it was a community of learning of people that actually contributed to thinking about what this application for the stipend should look like. So can you describe that a little bit?
I don't know, because we talk all the time. Talk about how we designed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we knew it was there, but we have Jamie Blosser from Santa Fe Art Institute, who's really experienced in supporting arts and creative activities and innovation around community engagement and public engagement. And we've along with our core team, it includes a graduate student who's amazing and comes from a community organizing and nonprofit background in Tacoma, Washington. Kathleen Gigi, who's on our team, who has expertise. She's kind of a community engagement consultant, along with our evaluator. And then Chris Jonas from Little Globe, Tim Castillo, who's one of my colleagues in the architecture department, but in this role, he's the special advisor to the provost for UNM in Santa Fe. And then we conducted a survey, sorry, but a really targeted survey going out to some of the key actors that we've heard about. That was also a kind of co-created list, and to understand more about what they see as community engagement, what they valued from it, the kinds of activities they've been involved in before, what they think about those. And all of those sources kind of help shape the design of this program. And I forget how it came up. It's like, oh, why don't we do it in 2 phases? But this idea of bringing on essentially grantees as partners really kind of opened up a new way of thinking about this whole process. That group of advisors and team members team partners are going to continue to grow, and we'll get richer and more experienced and more effective as we go along. I don't know if that's what you were talking about, Daniel. Okay.
Yeah, no, actually, thank you for sharing that and for providing a bit more of that detail. That's, it's interesting to hear how this process is developing. And one question I've always had is, how do we know that we've hit the mark? And so finding that balance, and I'd like to hear a little bit more of that balance of trying to avoid the top-down process of here's the activities that we want, here's the number of people we want to reach, and listening to the community and what their voices are, but also making sure that at the end of the day, we can say, hey, we really feel that we've done enough. And so I'm curious how you all are going to be able to assess that in a way that is also really iterative with the community partners.
Another great question. So this is where we borrow on our academic experience of research and studies, where you kind of define success early on, identify the indicators of success, and monitor progress along the way. And Kathleen is really key to that in her experience as an evaluator. Another thing I didn't mention, we did do a charrette, internal. I feel okay using that term when it's an internal process, but we did have a public engagement charrette with the DPAC team, our first, core advisors, and importantly, the city's public engagement steering committee. And we went through, we tried to model our process of being a community of learners and a community of practice. And we asked the question, what are the goals of public engagement? What do we hope to learn? What would be the indications of success? It probably was too short of a day in the end, but probably as much as you could stand in a Zoom room. And so we'll keep coming back to this. How do we measure success? So those will do periodic self-evaluations and reflection, as well as kind of a final report. And those interim reflections really mean that we have the opportunity to adapt our plan as we go along. And so I think we've built that in.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. And also, as you mentioned, having that first round of grantees be part of that process, I think will also be very helpful. And then when and how frequently are we going to be getting updates? Again, finding that balance between not having us micromanage, but also this is this is an area of great importance, wanting to make sure that we're staying updated while also really allowing that community process to develop. So what is the plan in terms of how frequently we're being updated on progress, on process, on challenges, successes?
Whoops, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Daniel to speak to that because we're setting out a series of progress reports, and then some of these progress reports will kind of align in to the general Midtown reports that we're going to put out on a monthly basis. But maybe Daniel wants to talk about the.
Yeah, so we, the council has requested, and I say that, like, I'm glad you guys requested it. The request is that there's a monthly progress report that we'll be generating, and they'll be topic-oriented progress reports. Public engagement will be one of them. And then every month, that's once a month, the progress report. Also once a month, there'll be a presentation. One of the presentations in the upcoming months, probably within the next 2 months, March or April, will be a public engagement presentation that Alex and Michael will do. And it'll be much broader than this. We're just presenting the work plan tonight. But again, you know, EDAC committee frequently invites me through Rich. I make presentations on giving progress reports. I'd be happy to do it here. Michael may not always be available, but you know, someone on her team may be helpful in backing up, you know, giving progress reports on what's happening. But we are happy to come back and provide updates, and if there's any questions, happy to respond to them as quickly as possible too. So anytime you want.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I don't believe I have any further questions at this time, but I really am looking forward to watching this process unfold. I think that this is a really interesting, creative way to do this that I hope we can also look at how we utilize this for other projects across the city and take the lessons learned. So I will be really interested to hear what areas are successful and where also we have a few bumps in the road. I know that sometimes there is a hesitancy to talk about where the lessons learned are, but I think that could be really valuable for us. So when those presentations do come up, I know that I'd be really interested to hear, hey, where did we mess up and where did we, how did we course correct in a way that we are learning from this, not to chastise ourselves, but really to see how we can learn and use these processes in the future. So thank you guys very much. I'm really excited. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to the next update.
Thank you.
Councilor Garcia, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I forgot to pull my hand down. The questions I had, Councilor Villarreal asked them. But
Okay.
Thank you to Ms. Ladd and Mr. Hernandez and Mr. Brown and Professor Pride for being with us tonight. I really appreciate the thorough update.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did just want to reinforce, I think, some of the stuff that Councilor Villarreal said, and that I don't think we need to be in a hurry for this process. I know there's some people that aren't happy with how much we're paying for it and want to just kind of move on, but I think we need to get this process right this time. So I'm looking forward to that. I also agree with her on the language that we put out to the public. We have to make it as inviting as possible, language that everyone can comprehend. And I'm hoping that as we go through the process that we can make accommodations for Spanish speaking people to be able to engage and be part of the process as well. So interpreter services, I think, are huge in this, especially in that part of town. And I also agree with Councilwoman Casas-Sanchez about the bottom-up approach. I think also extremely important. My question that I do have is for Rich, and I think I don't know if it was Public Works or Facilities that was going to do an assessment of all the buildings. And I think it's important as we go through this to be able to let the public know that really what buildings are in really good condition and don't require much money in order to get them usable again. And then what buildings are possibly in disrepair. So do we know where we're at on that?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'm going to check in with Sam Burnett, but I think he does have a preliminary list because last year we had to figure out which buildings to decommission because we were coming into the winter months. So there may be a preliminary building list now that I can bring back to you and to this committee, but I know that Sam had worked on that through Public Works. I don't know if it's been updated recently, it may have, but I can get back to you on that. But I know we had to look through that when we were trying to figure out which buildings to decommission and which buildings were sort of still active in a lot of ways. So.
Good. I think that's important for the monthly meetings as well as for information when the public starts to weigh in on things that they may want to see or happen there as well. So thank you all for the work you've done. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the plan of coming to the council at least once a month to keep us updated on things that are going on. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick questions. How will this process interface with the last process in terms of the outcomes? And that's probably a question for Rich or for Daniel. You know, are we starting anew, or are we adding, is this supplementing what we already have prioritized for that campus? How does this process inform the last one?
I'll start, and Michael, you might want to help me out with this too, because it's my understanding that there were discussions. You know, Michael talked a little bit about those surveys, informal discussions, surveys that they did, and they learned a lot about the process that established those early goals or those previous goals in 2018 that ultimately got documented in the planning guidelines for Midtown. So there was discussion about how they were, you know, who was involved in creating those, confirming them. But during that workshop, I'll change charrette to workshop. During the workshop that we had together with the DPAC and the Public Engagement Committee, there was a general sense, like, rather than saying we're throwing out, you know, the baby with the bathwater, we're going to build on what we have and refine along the way. So there wasn't an intention to sort of like negate things, because there was a lot of work done that built that foundation, but to strengthen it in ways and also to allow people to participate in it and refine it and, you know, amend it if necessary. But I think it's more of refining and getting confirmation from communities that maybe didn't feel or actually weren't involved and participated in that process. So my understanding from what we all talked about during that workshop is let's build on it versus like demolish it, but you know, and refine it moving forward. Does that sound right, Michael?
Yes, that's just right, Daniel. We want to, when we say we want to value community voices, that's all the community voices and the conversations that have happened over the last 3 years, as well as the conversations that will happen over the next 6 or more months. And so it's really building upon, we want to try to, one of our major priorities is reaching some of those voices and community members or interests that were less represented in the earlier years. Use the documents that exist, you know, those principles, et cetera, as a point of conversation, a discussion starting point in some cases, to verify it, amend it, refine it, as Daniel said, with a community benefit and community development focus. So identifying conflicts, right? And identifying maybe potential ways to mitigate those conflicts, and all the while realizing what we need to have at the end of the day, the development plan and the development agreement and the other policies have to be viable, feasible, and desirable, the combination of those things. So that's our challenge, that's our opportunity, and we're excited to do that and to honor all of those voices.
Right, and I do think, you know, this is honoring all the voices is part of the reason why we've been waiting and wanting to see more public engagement, is that the last round, there were people who felt left out, and we want to make sure we capture those people this time around. So I think that's great. It'll be interesting to see how that comes forward, what comes forward. You did say something, Daniel, that, so if a priority comes forward where there's a particular number, a particular percentage, say pegged to something, and it's not economically feasible, you said it would become part of the disposition agreement. But I think what Professor Pride just said is that these things are going to be evaluated to make sure that they're doable. I can't remember the exact words she just used, but we're going to make sure that what we're doing is feasible, I guess is the word maybe you used, so that we're not, putting things out there that, are not attainable.
Yeah, that can never be implemented. Yes, part of the scope that strategic economics has as well is to vet some of the priorities of proposals through an economics lens. But that's just one lens of many. And so part of the workshop also and previous and leading up to the work plan with the DPAC team was those tensions that happen along the way and how they get resolved. And the roles will all have to play in figuring out where is the sweet spot of overtaking and being actually implementable. And one of the things we all talked about was, this is a moment in time. In 5 years from now, the world economics may look much different, and in Santa Fe. And so, recognizing in any document that's created that 5 years from now, the city agrees to reevaluate on what's working, what was implementable, where are they in these commitments, that accountability value. Where are we in those commitments, and do we need to readjust in 5 years from now? So maybe get further community benefits because the economy is doing so well, or whatever it is. But again, it's a moment in time, and that's what we're developing these for. But they'll talk about the underlying, neighborhood stabilization, community stabilization issues that we want to address.
We don't really anticipate highly quantifying the recommendations, X number of units at this price point, for people at this income or whatever, but really more of a performance standards, if you will, what the project needs to be, who the communities that might especially need certain benefits, and a catalog of practices that could help reach those goals in ways that are both viable, or also feasible, viable, and desirable. Does that make sense? And to Daniel's point, also adaptable, right? Recommendations that recognize the shifting conditions.
Okay. And then just one last question on this, sort of goes to how do you measure success? And I don't know that you spoke, and if you did, I missed it, about, how you'll reach out to groups, and will you be reaching out to particular groups that perhaps represent populations that were underrepresented in the last go around? Or how do you know you're going to have, well, I don't know. And if you get certain groups coming forward and you feel like there's a segment that's missing, will you reach out to some organization that you think might be able to help that segment be part of the process? That's sort of a,
I know, it's one of those, it's like, how do we know when we've hit hit our goal of the portions of the population to reach, the communities, the interests, etc. And we have spent months now in both mostly informal conversations and some organized mechanisms like our survey that drew upon the past experiences of city staff, of our partners in this, SFAI and UNM, and other Let me just say, we think we've done a fairly good job when we look at our list by both the names of people, but the organizations that they are aligned with or allied with. And then we've also asked them in our survey, we asked them what their main mission was, who they've worked with before. We had a long list, all those groups, who they've worked with before, whom they'd like to work with, and we've asked for other names and other organizations. So I think they call this like a snowball or something, where, you know, you invite a couple people and you say, well, who else should we invite? And could you invite some more? And so that's how we're building our list, but we will use some data collection to help us realize whether we've done this right. We're really providing upfront organization, facilitation, and then infrastructure support for engagement activities. We don't imagine designing a whole lot of them. We're kind of providing the space and the spaces and the support for partners to design and implement their engagement activities. We think that the partners that will emerge and who will receive the stipends know their communities best, that the communities with whom they've been working, they know the ways to reach them. They are trusted members of the community. So we leave it to them, and we look forward to learning from them and with them.
So you'll be reaching out to that list and telling them about this process and these grants and this opportunity to contribute to the vision.
And we started out with kind of email invitations to the survey. We really started out with informal conversations, like picking up the phone or sending out an email. Can we talk about Midtown? And from that, we built our list, and we reached out for the survey. We don't have a lot of responses, but we will keep the survey open. We'll give periodic reports on what we've learned from the survey and who's participated, at least by some kind of description, if not by name. And and we'll continue to, even improve the survey based on the first go round. It's like, oh gosh, we should ask this, or, so the survey isn't our primary instrument. It's just a way to have a consistent questions and to be able to look at that. So Hallie Burt, who's the research assistant or the graduate assistant on this project, is going through a process of doing the reviewing and evaluating the first round of survey responses. And we'll have a report from that, I think, within a week or so.
Great. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm sorry, Alex, and then we'll go to Councilor Villarreal for a follow-up.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in quickly, because I think from even before DPAC was willing to be our partners in this, we were talking about how do we let the stakeholders drive the bus. Like, this is their process. They get to own it. They might decide that having a party at campus that's it. That's all we needed to do. And we feel great about that. So, I think it's a really complicated question, because we're not necessarily the ones deciding what's enough. The groups that are using these stipends to design their own activities, that's really kind of what they get to tell us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councilor Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just one more statement or comment, that I struggle with the word economically feasible, because I think about when we talk about it, we're thinking about like the status quo of economic models that have not served us in our country and our community. And historically, they have set up in certain ways. And I'm just thinking now, like how our economy is shifting with COVID and whatnot, that we're seeing that these economic systems and models are failing and they're not sustainable. And I just want us to think beyond what we know is the norm or what we've been used to, because I just think it's a different way we need to start thinking about what is possible in our communities. Because we think about, oh, that model doesn't really work because it's not economically viable or we don't get the return on investments that we want. And I'm just like, God, why can't we think of something else? I don't know where to go with that. I'm just hoping staff, we think about this regularly, and I don't have a solution. When I hear from people that are in that field of, financiers and whatnot, I don't know. I just don't feel like we're seeing everything holistically and that we're using models that don't serve communities. So I'm just making that statement because it bothers me when we keep talking about economic feasibility, and I don't know any other way because I'm not in that world. It's just that I want us to think more broadly, I guess, and open minds and open hearts. Thank you.
Professor Pride, you wanted to
I do.
respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Councillor Villarreal for that comment. I really appreciate it because, I was just talking with my students, or this week we've been chewing through a lot of stuff, and we're really talking about redefining return on investment and an enlightened cost benefit analysis process that although we know that things won't get built if it doesn't work out somehow, but in really identifying what the benefits are, kind of the multiples of benefits in short and long term, as well as identifying ways to leverage resources and identify multiple resources to achieve those benefits and the really greater return on investment in a longer run is what, it's kind of I won't say that I think everybody on the team is practically with me on that, but that's just my personal perspective. It's my goal in my work, and I know that the resources are there. It's just not a kind of classic real estate investment model and a standard pro forma, spreadsheet. It's more than that, and that's why government, cities get involved in development of the spaces and their boundaries. When you want you want community benefits and community development along with some kind of economic stability or security or benefit. So I really, can I say this? This is probably recorded, and I want, well, what I appreciate about the current moment is a great opportunity for the city to say, this is what we value, and this is how we're going to prepare the Midtown site to deliver on those values. And if it was really just about money, you all would be voting to sell it tomorrow or maybe last year. And there's a reason why you didn't make that decision. And there's a reason why that's not maybe maybe not the best decision as stewards of this community. And so I really appreciate that despite this kind of financial pressure of the debt service, that you're taking time to really hear from the various communities of Santa Fe and think about this huge asset. It's a really significant asset, and leveraging it for the benefit of all of Santa Fe.
Amen. I'd love to talk to you offline sometime, Michael.
Okay.
Just catch up when we can. Thank you.
Same here.
Okay, Thank you so much for being here tonight. I don't see any other questions from counselors, so we will move on to our second presentation of the evening. And Rich, I think you're doing that, and it's an update on the Community Development Department reorganization.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So I have a slide deck here just to give an overview of the Community Development Department. We've been in place now for about 6 months, and so I'm trying to sort of express what we've been doing so far, and I've broken the presentation into a couple of different parcels. One, I'm going to start with an overview and introduce the team and leaders that are there. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about some data that I've been gathering. I haven't been able to put it into a dashboard yet. I'm just still sort of gathering data, but someone had mentioned about measuring success in a previous conversation, but that's ultimately what I'm trying to get to, but I wanted to show you some data that I've collected so far. And then I'm going to also talk about some of the collaborations that we've been doing as we've joined together as one department, and also collaborations that we're doing with other departments to show sort of this synergy that I talk about when we talk about the mission of community development. And then from there, I want to just talk about some of the goals that we have for the next fiscal year. They're aspirational, but they're also practical. And then lastly, I will stop with aspirational goals for the fiscal years beyond. So these are all goals that we'd like to get to, and they all intersect with how much funding we have and whether they are practical in the times that we're in. So with that in mind, I'm just going to start from there. Oops. Oh. So our mission is around quality of life, and we talked about this last year at our budget hearing. You know, we say a livable place for Santa Fe is like where land use and transportation planning and tourism and job growth and diversification of our economy provide this this opportunity for creating wealth and for lifting up the quality of life. And making that happen for us is this integrated Department of Community Development. And our sort of slogan is that we're created to take advantage of the built-in synergies. There's 5 departments where they have these built-in synergies that will increase prosperity and improve quality of life. So it's an overview of our leadership. I am the director of the department, and there are 5 underneath of me: affordable housing, land use, tourism, arts and culture, and economic development. Starting with Alex in affordable housing. She actually has 2 staff in a vacant position. She does a lot of work on HUD, but she's a mixture. I call it 2 divisions. She does development and services. And she's here, I think, still online, and she might want to go into it. What's the difference between the housing development and housing services? And she was working on the Santa Fe Suites project for the CARES Act grant. On the arts and culture side, there's Pauline Kamiyama. She has 2 staff. She has 2 vacant staff. They're unfunded right now, but she has 2 staff working with her. And then she had a series of COVID CARES Act projects that I'll go into a little bit detail: COVID safe videos, a photo lab, and professional development, and some community grants. And then I'm also the director of economic development. So I still have my working groups on top of community development, and that's just the economic development group. And then we have small business growth, we have business licensing, we have asset development, and also Midtown redevelopment. And there are 8 of us on that team, including me. And then some of the CARES Act programs that we worked on were Small Business and Nonprofits Continuity Program, Santa Fe Promise, which is still in play. And then we're putting public Wi-Fi. Right now, we've finished the community centers and libraries, but we're working on districts 3 and 4. And then we have tourism with Randy Randall, who's the director, and he has 2 divisions and about 40 staff. And he used some of the CARES Act money at the convention center to put synchronous wireless. It just means that if you're there, the same amount of data that you can get to go up and down. If you have a document you want to send out or a document you want to receive, it is easy to do now, because it used to be that it would take you 10 minutes to upload something and then it'd take you 30 minutes to download it. So we now have it so it's synchronous. And then they updated the air purification system. As you know, we're going through a pandemic. So as we come out of it, this is a nice benefit to have at our convention center. And lastly, we have land use and planning. E.I. Isaacson is the director. There are 6 divisions there and about 47 staff. They include buildings, inspections, enforcement, engineering, historic preservation, planning, and MPO. And Jason Cluck is the assistant director there. And they collaborated on the CARES Act project where Eli took the lead with me and the team on the Santa Fe Promise campaign. So now I move into some of the stats that I'm collecting and I wanted to share with you. Again, I will share this whole deck with you after this meeting because I just compiled it over the last 24 hours. But as of February 17th, you can see there's a lot of housing projects in place. There's a little legend at the bottom here. You can see at the bottom, it says District 1, there's 472 units, 56 of them are affordable. District 2, 739, 45 affordable. District 3, there's 1,580 with 73 affordable. And District 4, there's 2,574 units with 377 affordable. Some of the stats that go with that map there is that there's a development pipeline that I'm working with Eli and his group. There are 7 developments to be built. There's construction units, about 760 there. Under approval, there's 19 with 1,705. The pending ones are 5 of them. There's 894 units there. And then plats recorded, 3 with the 33 units in those plats recorded. And then under construction, there are 19 with a total of 1,768 units. So you can see from just these stats that there is a lot of housing happening in Santa Fe, and construction is one of the fastest growing industry sectors we have right now. Also, there's the permitting group, which I don't think some people follow at all, but they have been very busy. From July of last year to the present, they've issued 3,871 permits with a valuation of over $223 million. And in fees, they've collected $5 million in fees. Moving on to housing, as I said, from the CARES Act grant, Alex and team worked on the Santa Fe Suites purchase. It was a $7 million purchase. $2 million was provided by the CARES Act funds. It came in just at the end of the year, December 31st. It closed just at the deadline date. There's 122 units there, roughly 50%, as she said, were leased up. And then she's using kind of a property management model, which is a third set aside with supportive services, and they're focused on high needs tenants. And then, as I said, approved by HUD, there could be an additional 580,000 that could be brought to bear to support the services that come with this new purchase with Santa Fe Suites. More data that she collected about affordable housing is that she had an allocation of funds, and this money, 600,000 to the CDBG, 500,000 for the housing trust, 300,000 in general fund, has been used to accomplish these following things: 130 rental housing situations, et cetera, 20 homeowners, 27 home buying families, and then there are 800 households that through the city supported programs have training and are certified as buyer ready, which is a really nice number, that 800. And then we're supporting financial counseling for about 250 households annually. Moving on to arts and culture. This is just a layout of some of the CARES Act projects that they worked on. They were mostly workforce development, which is one of the things that we wanted to do to stimulate the economy. So they had a professional development workforce training program that was at their, I forgot what, the community center, and they did digital marketing and recording and digital literacy. You can see the number of attendees that attended. They also had a photo lab there to help artists sort of get up and jumpstart their business. And it offers the resources to digitize their portfolio so that they could send it into different channels. And then another arts education program that they did with the public school system. Additionally, they worked closely with us on the Santa Fe Promise on a COVID-safe practice video with Carlos Medina, which was in Spanish. And I think there were 3 of them that were done. And they did public outreach through all different channels, but we did a lot of local radio and TV spots that came with it. And then finally, they had an arts community mini grant, which they gave $750 grants to about 50 artists from that standpoint with CARES Act money. So you can see that the arts and culture group really did leverage some of that CARES Act money for an industry or a sector of our city that was looking for support, but also had a lot of activity that helped them through these times until the next tranche of money comes. On the business licensing side, that's a part of economic development. Currently, up to date, we have issued 56 new licenses. And I want to stress that because we are in a pandemic and an economic collapse, but we still have issued 56 new business licenses, unique. licenses renewed. So far, we've renewed 1,571. Keep in mind that last year, the City Council approved the rolling license law. So businesses now can renew their license based upon their issue date. So to date, we've had 1,571 processed, but we have about 7,000 businesses in the system. And I'm still trying to extract some data to say of that 7,700, what have closed and what haven't. And it's been a little hard to get that, but we're trying to work with all of our chambers to see if we can get some data that goes with it. They average about 120 calls a day, and there are 2 people in that department. And so to me, that's a positive and negative. It's positive that so many people are looking to renew or looking to start a business in some way. Sometimes it's tied to their permits, but that's a lot of calls, and it just tells me that there is still high activity on the business side. And so what we want to try to do, if the federal government brings more grant money in, that we can also help stimulate that economy so that we can actually increase that number and maybe bring some staff in to support that workload.
Hey, Rich. This is Renee. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you just tell us who the 2 staff people managing the business licensing now?
Yes, so currently it's Vince Daniels and Celeste Valentine.
Thank you.
And then we get part-time help from Esperanza Trujillo, who works in community engagement, and then part-time she works in the land use side. So she's a kind of a part-time helper. We also have an InterGov site that just went live. We have this, what they call CSF, which is a community self-service. And so we're starting to automate some of the processes where a business owner can go to a website and fill in their information, and the information comes into our licensing team, and they can process it much quicker so that we can get to those potentially 7,000 licenses to renew. On the public Wi-Fi side, as I mentioned, we started over the spring and summer with offering public Wi-Fi at our community centers and libraries, and we're now in the process of expanding this public Wi-Fi and digital divide activities to some of our mobile home parks that are very dense in districts 3 and 4. And we're going through all the diligence, the legal issues, the getting of poles and making sure that the wireless systems can be put in. But right now we're just collecting data on the current installations that we have. And as you look at this data, you can see it's from August until now. But right now it's a flat usage. And for me, that's still a good thing, that it's flat, that people are still using it and people are still coming back. But you can see it comes up and down based upon holidays, based upon when people come back and forth to work. It's on until midnight every night. So some people may use it after work to use it for accessing the internet, but some also drive their kids to the parking lots and do the work for a couple hours a day. So this usage document comes to me on a weekly basis, and I sort of track it to see what are our daily usage, what are our unique users, and how do we look like as the year goes on from a public Wi-Fi standpoint. So moving to the next section, the collaborations. As I said, the community development is formed so that we can put some synergies together, all these different departments to work on ways to increase our prosperity and also increase and build on our sustained quality of life. So I just put some different examples of tourism, economic development, arts and culture. You can see, reading from this document, the types of collaborations that we've been doing since we've been officially formed together. Economic development has been working with land use. We now have the land sales public asset website together. We're working on a scattered sites program with affordable housing that we're hoping to get on board once we get it back to the city council. Tourism is working with us. They helped us on the CARES Act grant with tourism businesses getting grant money. We worked together on the Film Commission. They're also working with us and Jennifer Fobian on the community data platform. And then we just launched, or have launched about a month or so ago, a new e-commerce platform to stimulate the business economy called Shop Where We Live, Shop Where I Live. And if you're looking to buy local, this is a great place to bookmark santafe.shopwhereilive.com, and you'll see a couple of the businesses. We're trying to get up to 200 businesses. I think right now we're at about 60, but we're trying to get those businesses there. And then I'm going to go up a little bit, and you can see that economic development, tourism, and arts and culture, we all work together on trying to get the Nova app launched. That's nova.com. And as of today, I think we're at 920 users. Just a month ago, we were at 620. So it's still climbing, and we're still in the pandemic, so we're very interested in making sure that all happens. Also, the Arts and Culture Department has a video that hopefully is going to be Amazon Prime this fall. It's called The Story of Art. And so that was a collaboration between tourism and the Arts and Culture Department. And then intra-department, which means, you know, public works or community health and safety or community development, we are also working on different projects where we have been helping with Connect, tying our All Together Santa Fe program in. We also helped when the pandemic was in full swing with the COVID shelter. I worked on food security issues on top of the public Wi-Fi, and I worked with the Public Works. Regina Wheeler was in charge of putting it up together, and then Kira and I worked on how to get the food security system all set up with the food banks, the different delivery services. We had the hot meals program with Andre's thing that we had at the community college. It's a blank on its name, but we had a hot meal program that was served 30,000 meals. And then we also have been working with Public Works, Public Utilities, and our full department on this Midtown development. They are part of some of our strategic tactics teams, which we'll be sharing with you as we go through our monthly and weekly, bi-weekly update reports. So we do work across those departments. And then Public Works originally was working with tourism on the downtown bathrooms, which I think we discussed at the finance meeting just the other day. So moving to our next section, talking about goals going forward in the next fiscal year. As I said, we're in a COVID period right now. The businesses are not necessarily at 100%. So I'm always looking for ways to do economic recovery and economic resiliency. So I'm trying to strategically use my funding currently and then looking at it in the FY22 to build some resiliency in our programs. Recently, I have invested in some small business accelerator programs, and then recently also sponsored the New Mexico Angels to see if we can work with for innovation, to do more webinars, to get more innovators out to invest in our economy. Again, continued Midtown Master Planning. I'm working with Public Works on that. Real estate asset management, we've talked about that. There are two parcels of many that we're looking to get in front of the City Council. And then we have our website that we've created. We are working with the community college and all of our local economic advisory partners to create an entrepreneurship hub that we will house right now at the Higher Education Center. And so we're hoping that we're all out and vaccinated by the fall and we can launch this e-hub, but we're working with those groups. And then tourism is working on what do we do to jumpstart that industry and hopefully can get us back to 2019 levels. So there's some economic recovery programs that we're working together on that. As I said before many times, that a healthy economy is a diverse economy. So I'm looking at how do I revive and develop in our industry clusters. We can't just necessarily rely on tourism. We have to rely on other industries so that we can balance out our livelihoods and opportunities in the city. So these are some of the areas of industry sectors that we are constantly monitoring and constantly keeping in touch with, either from an expansion standpoint, from a recruitment standpoint, or an engagement standpoint. And then we are also working with Alex on a long-term housing development plan. So we're collaborating on that for FY22. So we're setting aside some funding for that. Then we're looking at, in the fall, the Global Entrepreneur Week, just another way to engage our local businesses. We've been a partner with this global program for 3 years. So this will be our 4th year coming in. And then I think recently there was a presentation on the community data platform, just a great way for us to provide a dashboard for all of our constituents, residents, business, tourists, to understand how healthy and successful is our city. How do we benchmark success? We look at data that could be used for COVID information, data we can use for tourism information, data we can use for how our business is growing. And then also, I'm always looking at different types of job training and workforce development. We also not only need to focus on businesses, but we also need to focus on our community and looking at ways to find creative ways to find job training programs and ready to go. Excuse me. My last slide really is just focus on the future. It's all aspirational, but I wanted to at least share this with you because this is a part of what we'll be talking about. This FY23 will come in a blink of an eye. But developing guidance on placemaking and placekeeping, that just means that if we look at Santa Fe as a really interesting city where people are coming to start businesses or businesses are expanding, how do we make it so that we talk about walkability? How do we make it so that we talk about housing? I heard something the other day and I thought it stuck with me for the last couple of days, is that someone had mentioned that most people have better memories of college because it's the first time in their lives that they were able to walk around and do all kinds of things right outside their door. Normally you grow up, you drive your car everywhere. But when you get to college, you have like a 10-block radius where everything's at your fingertips, right? And I thought that was pretty fascinating, but that's sort of what placekeeping is about, is how do we build a city of the future and keep the past, but figure out ways where we still draw our young people in and also make it a place that's quite livable, but think about sustainability and the things like walkability. We're also looking at building a growth management optimization strategy. That all ties into placekeeping too, but it's really about creating a long-range plan. We don't have a long-range planning office right now, but we also learned that you don't necessarily need a long-range planning office. You can start with little steps and build growth optimization into strategic plans. And this department, because we're now sort of pulled together, we can work together to get that done. Again, strategic investments, looking at possibly getting our windfall on from any of our land sales, increases the capacity of land use planning and permits. As you know, there was $5 million in fees collected in permits. Talk about transportation and mobility, that falls back to the placekeeping. And then the regional innovation corridor, again, is a part of this placekeeping idea. Working with we have a couple of folks here who are looking to invest in Santa Fe to build larger innovation villages that include housing and centers of excellence and places where people who want to work remotely or work in a sort of a gathered environment, parks, et cetera. They want to sort of see that coming from downtown to the south side by the Presbyterian Hospital, but also figure out what the multimodal transportation ways to get there so that you could get from downtown to Presbyterian in 10 minutes versus making your way down Cerrillos with 15 stoplights. And then lastly, I have countywide fiber. I know that we ultimately need to look at the future, and fiber and broadband is a key way for us, for all citizens, to be able to have some equity around what we use for fiber. It's our daily bread. Right now, we are using fiber to have this meeting, and some are on, some are off, but we know that we have to figure out what the architecture is to get some competitive options here, work with the county, and then also we're looking at, hopefully, the new federal government bringing in some grants for fiber, because I know that's a part of what the Biden administration is about, is fiber and broadband is a key issue. They're focusing on the rural areas, but we're hoping that our county-city partnership might be able to give us some of that fiber money that's coming in. Okay, with that, I'm open for questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rich. Questions from the committee, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rich. Your comment about college made me reflect back on my days, and I don't know if it was walkability that made it so memorable for me.
Some of it.
but it definitely was a memorable time period of my life. I really appreciate this update, and I just want to give a quick shout out to all the city staff that worked hard to accomplish what this presentation that you just ran through. It's really great to see what is being accomplished. I think my challenge is I'm trying to extrapolate what accomplishments have been or can be attributed to the reorganization. We probably all remember when we were looking at the proposal, I wanted to be able to quantify and see data, how we can attribute success to the reorganization. And right now, I'm still not able to do that. And I know you mentioned you're collecting data, and I really appreciate that. And hopefully, as you collect that data, we'll be able to quantify these successes are due solely to reorganization. Because right now, to be honest, I don't see anything that wouldn't have been accomplished if a reorganization hadn't been approved. And I'm not saying that's the case. I just can't decipher that right now. And there's nothing justifying that. So with that, as I mentioned, as you collect the data, if we can extrapolate that and figure out how to present that, I would really appreciate that. And in addition, as we're collecting the data, I'd also like to understand where there are still gaps. I think, you know, it's great to rally around the successes that have been had these past 6 months, but we also want to understand and clearly understand what might have been the challenges these past 6 months. That way we can determine how we resolve that and how we set a plan moving forward. We don't want to turn a blind eye to that. I think focus on the good just as much as we focus on the bad. I like the way that we're starting to not only look beyond this upcoming fiscal year, but fiscal year down the road, and how we're looking at partnering up with, you know, Santa Fe County, potentially tribal entities, because I think, you know, at the end of the day, sure, the city, we've got to focus on what's going on within our boundaries, but we're all in this together. And so with that being said, how does the state of New Mexico play with this? You know, you did mention looking at federal grants for resources, but I really appreciate that foresight, because, you know, that's something we need to do, in the sense that forecasting and planning is necessary, because sometimes getting things accomplished is not a 6-month process. It is sometimes a 5-year process. And I, like I said, just appreciate that foresight, Rich. Don't really have any questions, just a recommendation as you began to look at that data, if we can pull it together in some way or form, as I requested. But other than that, no questions. Thanks so much, Rich. I know it was a lot of work putting this presentation together, and I appreciate all the information provided. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks.
Councillor Cassett Sanchez, your hand is up.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I do have that similar question of, what is attributable to the reorg? How has this been successful? And Rich, I don't know if you have an answer now of what you listed out, what would have been accomplished anyhow, and what do you feel is accomplished because there was a reorg? Do you have a sense of that at the moment?
Madam Chair and Councilor Cassett Sanchez, yes, one of the reasons why I put the collaborations in there is because I force those different collaborations to come to the table with one goal. And as I said, I don't have all the data yet, and I appreciate Councilor Garcia's comment about collecting the data, because I know that it's going to probably be FY22 when I can actually see some of the results. So those collaborations I could have mapped into short-term, medium-term, long-term. And so, looking at managing from a director level and making sure that all of them know that we have an aligned mission, instead of just land use being the charge, and then you come back and say, oh my God, I forgot, I should have called the housing people. You know, we can come together and sort of build up on what we have. And so we aligned at the goals. So when I talked about the FY22 goals, they are based upon those 5 departments, all of us sitting together to say, what are the key things that you will see on every budget hearing that we're all doing? So all those goals sort of map to what this aligned group is going to do. What I'm hoping to do from those collaborations I showed you is that by the end of June, I will be able to sort of say, what sort of stats have come out of it? Because I'm monitoring all of those as we speak. So I do think that the collaborations were something that they weren't artificial. I kind of forced them all. Some were already in place because of CARES Act, but that's kind of the plan right now as I see it.
Thank you. I appreciate you highlighting that. Of course, we only see what you present us and we don't get to be in all those meetings. So being able to provide that information is helpful. Yeah, I was happy to see some discussion of planning on there. That's actually something I've been speaking about in a number of different meetings, is this new understanding of how really planning our city is important, and bringing in all those different factors. One thing I do want to make sure that we are thinking about as well is how we are building our city capacity to achieve these goals. And this is something that I've been kind of mulling over is looking at where we need resources and staff, resources in our department to make sure that this work is ongoing, and that it's not just, great, we updated the general plan, that's wonderful, we're going to leave it again for another 22 years. And then 22 years later, we have another council that's sitting here saying, hold on a second, we are operating from an old plan. So those are some of the things that I want to be thinking about as we are looking at these goals. Specifically, it comes to mind for me for planning and for that land use piece, but also with affordable housing and with economic development and all these different areas. How do we make sure that we're building the city's internal capacity, that it's not just a one shot where we infuse with this new program, this new idea, this new project, and then it languishes, but really, how are we building that structure? So that's something that I'll be interested to see more about as proposals come forward for budget this year and in other years when there are more dollars, but even starting to build those foundations now, I think is really important. And then how those synergies also occur and looking at how we are building that capacity between the departments within the departments. It's the words get hard as we did not change. So the departments within the departments. So I do appreciate you bringing this forward. I do look forward to further updates, and as well as Councilor Garcia mentioned, the data and how we can quantitatively and qualitatively. I come from a world where we spend a lot of time with qualitative data. So how we can be looking at where this reorg has been beneficial, and to Councilor Garcia's point, where there might be holes or places that we feel we missed the mark, and looking at how we can continue to course correct and move forward. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the presentation tonight.
Sure. Madam Chair, can I address something that she said in her response? Sure. Councilor Casasanta, you brought up something that I wanted to share a little bit. One of the things that I am also discovering is that over the next 5 years, there will be a large percentage of our city employees who will retire, who will no longer be in their jobs. And while technology is catching up to us to be more efficient, there's a lot of intellectual capital of some of these employees that if we don't start the replacement process now, and that's where I thought about FY23 aspirational goals, if we don't start the replacement process now, we will walk backwards because we still have to take paper and put it into computers, right? So I think you're correct that if we're not looking at job skill training and the capacity of our city to sustain itself, we need to, that's one of the areas that I believe is important for us as we move forward into the future.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, just opportunities for, even staff that's not retiring, but just for growth within our staff. We know that if people don't see growth at their current employer, they may leave. And so providing challenging opportunities, providing structures for individuals to move up and develop. I really appreciate that you're thinking about that. So thank you for mentioning that.
Sure.
Councilor Villarreal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to my colleagues. I had the same questions for Director Brown. And thank you, Director Brown, for the presentation. It was actually helpful to kind of see how everything's connected or what's been going on since the reorg. And I think what I came out with too is still thinking about the capacity aspect, and just seeing you again reminding us that you're doing double duty. I don't know. I appreciate that you're doing that. I don't know how sustainable that is. I think it's really challenging. There's a lot going on, not just to cover all bases of all the different departments within the department, but then also economic development. There's a lot that needs to be done. So it makes me think about the capacity issue, and then making sure as we think about the upcoming budget and the next fiscal year, to make sure that we're fully staffed. We've had those gaps for a while, and then the furloughs didn't help, and the economic downturn. And So, and our budget deficit. So all of that combined has created these holes for us. And I just really want to stress to think about, and I know you probably are, but being fully staffed so that land use, we can increase the capacity. I know that was one of the goals you listed, increasing capacity of the land use permits division. Well, in my mind, it's also to make sure that we have enough staff people to do the job. And then affordable housing, things that we have talked about wanting to do to support affordable housing and what it would take and what staff capacity we have. Well, right now we don't have what we need in order to do what we need to do. So all those combined, I just want to flag that again as something that we need to make sure we're fully staffed, and also that, that intellectual knowledge you're talking about. And that I think it's the institutional knowledge. We've lost a lot of people in different departments for various reasons, but it's like we want to make sure that we keep people and empower them to do the kind of work that they want to do. And if they're not in the right place, to place them maybe somewhere where they can feel more empowered and proud about their job. And so I want us to think about that more fully. And it's a lot as a director to think about everybody. You're managing people, but you're also managing yourself and trying to figure out what's the best way to handle this work. So thank you for sticking it out with us. And I appreciate you. And I hope that, as we go into budget hearings, that we'll talk about this more and hopefully be able to staff up again. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands up. Director Brown, just want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate, I think, what this reorganization has done is the interdisciplinary work, the cross departments where you've got people from different expertise or different focus points working together towards a project. I think that is going to be very important moving forward. So I love the collaboration slides that you showed. I've been aware of some of that work just in my interactions with staff around various things, but it's good to see it summarized. And that to me is one of the very exciting parts about this reorg. And I think, our budget challenges, unfortunately, are going to be with us for a while. I believe the projections we had heard in finance were that we won't recover our gross receipts tax revenue for longer than it took the 2008 recession. And at 5 years, I think was sticking in my head as how long it'll take, assuming we just keep marching forward. We don't have anything else that makes us slip backwards. So I think it's going to be more important than ever to be laying the foundations that we can, so that when we do hit a place where we can be fully staffed, we'll be able to just move full steam ahead. And I appreciate the work that you do, wearing the multiple hats that you do, while we don't have the revenue to hire people to wear all those hats with you. So with that, I think we're done. I don't see any other questions from the committee. Really appreciate your work on this presentation and your help with the former presentation earlier. So thank you for being here.
Sure, thank you.
All right, I think from there we go to matters from staff. Jennifer, do you have anything?
Nothing for me tonight, Madam Chair.
Okay, matters from the committee. All right, matters from the chair. I have nothing other than to say that our next meeting is March 3rd, and really appreciate the conversation tonight. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the next round. Good night.
Good night, everyone.